Hello and good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Watershed Committee meeting, special board meeting for Marin Water on Thursday, October 17th, 2024. Terry, a roll call, please.
Good morning, Director Larry Russell.
Here.
Director Jed Smith.
Here.
Vice Chair Monty Schmidt.
Here.
Chair Matt Sampson.
Here.
And out today is Director Ranjiv Kush.
Great. Do we have any public comment on items on the agenda?
Not on the agenda.
Great. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda, please?
So moved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Director Russell.
Aye.
Director Smith.
Aye.
Director Schmidt.
Aye.
And Chair Sampson.
Aye. Do we have any public comment on non-agenda matters?
Yes, we do. Mr. Larry Minikis, please.
Good morning, and I'm sorry to miss the board meeting on Tuesday as we had our MCL board meeting, but I just want to comment on the work plan and how fantastic that presentation was and how in-depth it was, and really how it's going to help move the district forward. It was really a fantastic presentation and much appreciated. And I also want to just touch on some finger pointing that also happened that evening. And this was an advisor to Access for Bikes stating that we refused repeatedly to meet with other stakeholders to try to come to mutually agreeable solutions. And also that Christina Hoff was quoted saying that we offered to meet with them time and again to find common ground and a path forward, yet they've not accepted our offers. Well, let me be clear what this was. This was asking us to negotiate trails, to sit down and say this trail, this trail, and this trail. There's no way for us to go to our board and say, these are the trails that are being suggested for opening if we don't have all the facts that we needed from the district first. Which trails are going to be open? Were there going to be seasonal closures? Was it going to be odd, even days? Was it going to be directional only? There was so much that was not there that it made it impossible for someone like us to sit down and do a negotiation. And we said repeatedly that we are happy to speak. And Bill Keene and I have a good relationship. I've always been open. I've been 100% open with him. Anytime he wanted to meet or talk, I've discussed it with him. But it was always we came back to, look, Bill, we can't really talk about the trails until we see what the district wants to do. So I just want to make that clear, that we have been speaking over and over again with these people, that we do SASH, slow and say hello. We're all together there. We're all speaking for hours there. So to say that we weren't willing to speak, and also just pointing at MCL when we're not even the lead plaintiff on this. I hope the finger pointing and the noise level will come down a little bit, and we'll go through this process and we'll be able to resolve it, hopefully in the near future. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Terry. Any further comment?
There are none.
Great. Moving on to regular items. The minutes of the Watershed Committee meeting from September 19th. Need a motion to approve those, please.
So moved.
Great. Roll call vote.
I'm sorry, who second?
Second.
Thank you. Director Russell.
Aye.
Director Smith.
Aye.
Vice Chair Schmidt.
Aye.
And Chair Sampson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Item B, Nicasio Creek Fishery Study. Jonathan.
Yeah, morning, directors. Jonathan Kaler, Fisheries Program Manager. This item is a review and refer. So in September, the district prepared and distributed a request for proposals to do a fisheries study of Nicasio Creek. The studies needed to support the Nicasio Reservoir Spillway Raise project. Became apparent we really have very limited data for the reach of Nicasio below our reservoir. And so the study includes three main tasks: study the hydrology, basically the stream flow below the reservoir, assess habitat conditions below the reservoir, and then conduct a series of biological surveys for salmonids and other special status species that may be present there. The proposals are due tomorrow, October 18th. We'll be reviewing those. So what we're asking is that the board refer this to a future regular board meeting for review and approval of a professional services agreement with the selected consultant. And happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you very much. Looking at board comments, Larry.
No, thank you for doing this. This is important work. Very supportive. Yeah, I've got just a couple quick questions. In terms of the hydrology studies, could you go into a little bit more detail about what's included in those things that you just talked about?
Yeah, we left it somewhat open-ended for the consultant to provide, details on, but what we're looking for is really a relationship of stream flow in the creek below the reservoir in relation to our operations. So natural inputs from tributaries versus releases slash overflow from the reservoir. So basically a 1 year, 1 water year hydrograph. And that's what we anticipate the agencies will be interested in looking at.
So so you'll be looking at current hydrology
Yeah.
and looking for just one water year type, or would you be looking at a variety? Because we don't get one water year type
Yeah.
here.
The intent here is to support progress on the spillway arrays project. So in terms of timing, that's really what, this includes is 1 year of actual data collection and measurement.
So we're looking forward.
Exactly. So this is through, essentially starting in, say, November, probably installing a stream gauge or a series of stream gauges, and then collecting 1 water year's worth of data.
So would they extrapolate from would the study extrapolate from that 1 year of data because to estimate what would be flows in different water year types?
We don't explicitly have that in the RFP. That's potentially something that the consultant would have to determine if that's technically feasible given the data that exists or what they collect. So, but that's not currently written into the proposals.
Okay. I mean, I think if we're trying to understand stream flows downstream, seems like again we have more than one water year type here, arguably quite a number. But is that something that seems like that'd be valuable information to understand just what we would see in different water year. I mean, who knows whether we're going to get a wet year, a dry year. How is that? I guess part of knowing just what one water year type, how is that really telling us about what's the goal of knowing what the water is downstream if we're not trying to ask ourselves what will it look like in different water year types?
Yeah, Jonathan, if I could, I mean,
please.
and then you can clean up on this, but basically this sort of reflects our lack of information of this reach of the creek and our understanding at staff that we need to proceed with all haste towards this water supply project. I think there will be an element, and Jonathan's sort of expressing that, of developing the scope a little bit along the way. And there are, as he mentioned, it is sort of a loosely crafted scope at this point, recognizing that we will need to make some of these finer adjustments. And I think those are some of the things that you're getting into, Director Schmidt. So we recognize we don't have a fully loaded scope for your review today, but we do plan on developing that with the sort of experts that Jonathan and team will be selecting.
Seems like it's even more complicated than that to me, because not only do we not have much data, we manage the reservoir. So it's not like a natural thing. I mean, it may not spill because we've drawn water from it.
Yeah.
So we're affecting the equation.
But this is the first step, right? Because we do not have data there on this, what's going on past the reservoir. So we're starting to try to better understand what the
Well, we
conditions
have
on the
the
ground.
release data. If there's a release or a spillway event, we have that data. That's what Monty's talking about.
No, I'm
That
thinking,
we have,
I'm sorry, I'm just thinking conditions within the creek all the way to where it tags Lagunitas, right? We need to better understand what that habitat is and what our impacts are on it.
that's true from the habitat. We're talking about the hydrology, though. That's the issue, is what data do we have already? That's what Monty's asking. What data is already there that we could use to apply to the back? That's why I asked about going forward instead of going
Or
back.
backwards.
Yeah, I mean, the hydrology you might want to note for a variety of different reasons. Habitat could be one, but just, understanding what the contribution is to Lagunitas Creek and meeting other flow standards downstream. In order to look at that, you've got to look at what it would look like in different water year types given our operations. The best of all worlds is you've got 10 years or more of record. If we're going to go with just 1 year of hydrology data, then the best you can do is try to take that hydrology data and and then in essence model it to estimate what it would look like in, in a
To go
paired
backwards,
watershed
yeah.
study where you can look at, there's different, and this happens everywhere. Like this is not, again, we're not figuring out how to send someone to Mars. Like, there's many places where these types of hydrology studies are done where you look at your nearest gauge and you do you compare watershed sizes and other, there's methodologies that are very established where you take that data with whatever you collect and you can say, okay, here's how it pairs down. So, just having, if we're having consultants develop a hydrology component of this, having them take that data and then having them give that data, and extrapolate it to different water year types is, would be very informative. So I would encourage that scope of work just provide that information.
Or I'm assuming if we do get these results and we start moving forward in the Nicasio spill gates, this is going to be an ongoing assessment continually to some extent. Maybe not the same consultant, maybe not the same methodology, but we're going to be really understanding better how Nicasio Creek feeds Lagunitas.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if as a result of the project, there wasn't more ongoing monitoring.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't want to wait. I mean, I know this is really important to move forward as quickly as possible. Continuing to collect data is valuable, but 1 year of data and then having another year isn't a whole lot better. You might get, you get a range, you start getting more data, but like, we're going to have to run with a modeled analysis. That there's no two ways about that if we want to get this done quickly. So I'm just saying, like, it'll be faster to have the consultant start the work knowing that they're going to collect data and then extrapolate that, using various recognized and appropriate methodologies to just extrapolate to what the hydrology would look like over different water year types. It's really, this is like super basic stuff that's been done. So
I'd be surprised if that's not what the team concludes as well.
sure. But it's got to be in their scope of work otherwise they won't, because that takes more time and money than just collecting data and plotting out a graph that says, here's what the flow was, at the gauge.
Yeah,
So,
it's a very good point, and I think that was implicit, but we can definitely make that explicit when we go through the review process.
okay. I think that'll be,
This is not,
consultants like to have clarity and specificity. So.
especially on the money. This is not as much a criticism as it might sound. Is there any reason we didn't do this starting last year?
Well, the Nicasio spill raise wasn't as high up on the radar, I think, for us.
Yeah, but it was there.
The project came out of the assessment. I think it's just a timing for that
Okay.
particular project.
The second question is, does the dam leak?
I think all dams have seepage through them, and of course we measure that, but this performance of the seepage of the dam that we've reviewed has been pretty good. It's very consistent. Yeah, the dam's in good shape.
So we have where I'm headed is a different question. We have a base flow then.
Yes.
So that gives us some information that's all the time, regardless of weather, it's leaking that kind of number. So
Yeah.
that's helpful.
We also have somewhat opportunistic observational data, but there hasn't been a systematic assessment. So that's really what we're trying to establish.
Yeah, totally. And then in terms of the hydrology study, are we also going to be collecting temperature data?
That is not in the scope. That's potentially something we could do in-house if that was of interest.
I think that'd be smart because
I do too.
we have temperature requirements downstream, and understanding, the flow releases from Nicasio could be beneficial or it could be harmful. But if we don't collect the temperature data, we won't be able to say whether these additions are
Yep.
a positive or a negative.
Just for clarification, the temperature compliance point is actually upstream of the Nicasio confluence with Lagunitas, but I definitely get
We still care what
point.
happens.
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
compliance point is
Yeah.
is assumptive to be indicative of conditions downstream. But if we're changing releases in any way, that I'm sure that would be a good thing for us to know. So I would encourage us to, again, whether we have the consultant do it or this isn't terribly complex stuff to
Right.
stick a temperature probe out there. And then in terms of down to the reach below the dam down to the confluence, are we doing fisheries habitat assessment I know that you've said in previous conversations that there's steelhead habitat steelhead have been documented there. So are we going to be habitat typing that mile or?
Yeah, that's one of those 3 tasks is to do a full habitat assessment for salmonid specifically.
Uh-huh. Will there be any, any assessment of, flow and habitat relationships? So looking at, obviously there's, for people who don't know this, and obviously Jonathan does, flow affects the quantity and quality of habitat. So if sometimes if you add more water, that's actually bad. Sometimes if there's too little or none, that's obviously not good either. So understanding what that, the flow to habitat relationship is, are they going to be doing any sort of, I know it takes work and more data than we probably have, but are they going to be attempting to do some sort of qualitative or quantitative assessment?
So not in this initial phase. I will say that the way we've scoped it is to have 2 habitat assessments to really try to get at that question.
Okay.
Summer conditions and a winter/fall spawning condition.
Yeah,
So you could miss a big part of the year if you don't do both. So we do have both of those surveys included in the scope.
Cool. Great.
You mentioned the spawning. Have we ever seen a red?
There are fish that use that stretch for sure. We've seen both coho and steelhead. I would imagine Chinook also wander up. It really depends on the water year type.
How deep is it?
How deep? It really depends also where you are, but there are suitable spots for
They can make
spawning
it,
for
huh?
both. Yeah, they can make it.
So the salmonids you think are generated there or they just swim in there?
To be determined. Yeah, that's one of the reasons we're doing this study is to further illuminate that. Yeah, I imagine in some years fish are not able to get into the creek. In other years, it's quite accessible. The last couple of wet winters, I would imagine a fair number of fish just went that way.
I mean, sometimes, like what we saw with Lagunitas Creek when we had that pattern where fish got in, and then because of the reservoir and also the hydrology together, it created a very calm, steady winter. And sometimes that's perfect thing for fish. Like get them in, have them spawn, and then don't have any scouring high flows, which can result from reservoirs capturing, the peaks of the winter storms. You get production and abundance that you might not have otherwise. So who knows? So it'd be good to have but if you guys are going to do a spawning habitat and a summer rearing habitat analysis, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the jokes I like to tell is that there's fish out in the ocean with travel agent cards that hand out cards telling fish to come here because we've converted ephemeral creeks into steady discharge, which is a pretty unusual thing in nature, that you have a ephemeral creek that discharges continuously. That's an unusual event. And I have a question too that I never thought about, Paul, but have you guys looked at the hydrology of what happens when you have a reservoir and the groundwater? It seems like you've got the potential to make a losing creek into a gaining creek, I would think, because if you've got this huge pot of water up here pushing down on the aquifer, and even if it's de minimis percolation rate, it's still there. And
Yeah.
you got a lot of water in a small area to drain it into.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, the way they construct these dams is they sort of take all the loose material off down to the
skim it.
bedrock.
Yeah.
Out there, it happens to be sort of meta basalt, so it's pretty good stuff that they're on. It is a little bit fractured, but that dam is very well grouted.
Yeah.
I mean, the grout curtain extends across the whole length of the dam and the spillway itself.
I'm really thinking of the bottom of the reservoir.
Yeah, it's again, they use the bottom areas of the reservoir for the clay. So I don't know is the short answer to your
Yeah,
question,
yeah.
but it's an interesting
Well,
one.
of course, that would strengthen my question. If you've skimmed off the low permeability stuff and put it in the dam, now the stuff that's left is likely more permeable. And it seems that it could be having an effect on that. I mean, it'll show up in the results along with the leakage.
Well, it's a great point, Larry, because we see this elsewhere. The groundwater contribution, just naturally,
Yeah.
from the hill slopes into the channel. I mean, aside from a dam release, you know, and it's, or snowpack in our coastal streams, all the water you see in stream in the summertime is all groundwater.
Of course.
You know, having a big reservoir upstream that is, you know, putting water into the ground, and then, you know, if it's, especially if it's running into bedrock at some point, pushing back up to the surface, you know, it could be, I mean, an interesting thing would be to look at in years if there are, if there are times when we don't have any releases, and if there's water in the stream still, you know, downstream, then that could be almost all groundwater contribution, you know, which again, it could just be passively happening. And that's a
It
good thing
is
to thought.
happening.
It is
Yeah,
happening.
The question is how much?
Yeah.
And the stream, you know, the streams are interesting things too, because they are the natural excursion or release point for the water. So they're there for a reason. And it's and then you further complicate it by making a big river. That's basically what the reservoir is. The stream below feels like there's a huge river behind it pushing.
Mhm.
So it's kind of an interesting thing of the hydrology there, specific to especially one like this.
Great. Jonathan, thank you for this. And this is, I think, another example of what we're doing to making sure that we're taking care of the land that we are managing. And you know, yesterday we weren't doing any of the stuff in Nicasio, and now we have the ability to start, which looks like a pretty robust way to monitor and understand and help potentially improve that, just like we're doing on Lagunitas Creek, and maybe those phase 16 through 20 becomes Nicasio Creek, and we're really making an impact, which is in contrast to the accusations we've been getting lately about not taking care of our land through study. So thank you very much for
I
this.
have one more quick
Yes.
one. Is there any downside to this? That was my first thought about temperature is like, you know, we have a little problem with our temperature compliance in general. Getting more data, I don't know if that raises our profile with the regulators or not. It might.
You know, I would just say that the questions are going to come up pertaining to that aspect. In my, just anecdotally, my assessment of the creek, it's been very cold every time I've touched it and been out there and surveyed it. So I suspect some of those groundwater inputs that you mentioned are very possible.
I would think that actually indicates that the leakage is more significant than you might think, because the groundwater would generally be warmer than the surface water. But it would be consistent in temperature, the groundwater.
Yeah.
The surface water would vary, but if it's leakage through the dam, then it would be the water that we put in there that's leaking out. Any idea what the average temperature is in the reservoir?
Not off the top of my head.
Because
no.
our water is pretty cold.
Yeah.
I mean, relatively speaking, maybe not cold enough for fish, but it's cold to humans. And,
Oops, sorry, go ahead.
okay.
I mean, that you're bringing an interesting point, which is if, you know, do we have temperature in the reservoir as well? Are we collecting data that as well?
We do. We have quarterly data there in the reservoir.
Do we do stratified, or
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
That just understanding the cold water pool and the stratification, stuff like that, that could.
Does it stratify?
Understanding that Nicasio, is about to add, is operated as an unstratified reservoir. So
Yeah.
there's an aerator out there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so it's constantly mixing, so it doesn't stratify. Okay.
Shouldn't.
It should be homogeneous top to bottom.
Should be.
Yeah, should be.
Yeah, okay,
Right.
cool.
Harry, any public comment on this item?
There are none.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you very much.
Oh, there's a review and refer.
Sorry.
Oh, one more question. How many firms are you expecting to?
3
submit?
firms,
3 you sent?
Yeah.
Or-
and we're
you think-
expecting 2.
2.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
If I get a motion to review and refer this to the full board.
So moved.
Second.
Great. Thank you very much. Item number C, volunteer program update.
Yeah. Okay.
Good morning, Directors. Carl Sanders, Natural Resources Program Manager. With me today, Suzanne Whelan, Ecologist, Volunteer Program Coordinator. It's been a few years since the Watershed has presented an update on our volunteer program. Suzanne has a presentation for you today that will give you an update over the last year and over the last few years. This is a information item, and I'll hand it over to Suzanne.
Okay. Thanks. Terry, do I have my slides? Where do
Yeah,
I?
just
Sorry.
share
Oh, there we go.
and then pull it up here.
Thank you. Okay, and then we want to present. There we go. Okay. Good morning. So I am Suzanne Whelan, ecologist and volunteer coordinator at the Water District, and going to share a little bit of information about our volunteer and community engagement programs at the district. So we have had a volunteer and engagement program since 2009. And the numbers that I show today are going to mostly reflect the past fiscal year, so 2023 to 2024. And the goals of the volunteer program are to bring community together on the watershed, to give them opportunity to be part of the solutions and to feel like they have a role in environmental stewardship, and which supports the watershed and the bigger district of the mission. So from improving trails to restoring habitat to protecting wildlife, we have a wide variety of programs that support a wide variety of interests and skills with the community. We also offer community engagement programs, which allow more people to learn about what we do on the watershed. The vast majority of our programs are service-oriented, meaning they're hands-on, people are directly interacting with the land, and they're engaged in stewardship. So if you know that the watershed is a part of a larger biodiversity hotspot, and just on the watershed alone, we have 47 listed species that are either listed as sensitive, threatened, endangered, or rare. And on the watershed, we have over 1,000 plant species, which is 10 times more plant species than Yosemite, which is 20 times as large. So I always like to start my presentations with a trivia and just highlighting a few of our special species. Salamanders are super cool. They are also usually cool to the touch, salamanders and newts, and that they have porous skin and breathe through their skin, not through any lungs. So when there's presence of salamanders, that really shows that the water and the ecosystem is a healthy one. Wild bees have been a topic of focus lately. Through our community science efforts working with One TAM over the last few years, we now have records in Marin County of 276 different wild bee species in Marin. And we think maybe there's 300 to 400 different kinds of wild bees. This is a picture of a bumblebee on a lupin flower near the Sky Oaks Ranger Station. And, you know, we collaboratively do trainings with the California Bumblebee Atlas. So that local knowledge that we're collecting feeds into statewide studies on the bees and the protection of these pollinators. And all this work stems from the recent work we've been doing on the peak health reports. And then lastly, why are fungi our friends? Well, we also have a wide variety of fungus and lichen for the same reason that we have so many plant species. We have so many different kinds of ecosystems and microclimates. And this is a photo of I can never remember the name of a stocked bonfire cup, which was found in the Rock Spring area. We did a BioBlitz, public BioBlitz in the spring, which was just 3 months after we had that prescribed burn at Rock Spring. And, you know, fungus and lichen are also very sensitive, like salamanders, to climate change and air pollution. And this particular species is a fire follower, and it decomposes charred vegetation. So there hadn't ever been a record of this species on the mountain until we did this BioBlitz. So our volunteer and outreach programs support multiple plans. As you know, we have a strategic plan, the biodiversity, fire and fuels integrated plan from 2019. We have the Marin Regional Forest Health Strategy from 2023, and then the Recreation Management Feasibility Study just from 2024. Last watershed committee, last month, we presented on the fiscal year impacts from the BIFI-FIP, and Lauren presented a very similar slide showing the contributions by volunteers. So to the BIFI-FIP goals, the volunteers expand defensible space. They reduce invasive vegetation, which improves biodiversity. We have trained volunteers to remove lots of broom, and then also more nuanced species. And when we can get folks to do more targeted early detection, rapid response, that frees up some staff time. Also, we've had a huge lift over the past 2 to 3 years from our Grizzly Corps program. They have really helped us do much more outreach on beneficial fire and forest health into the community. So the Recreation Management Feasibility Study, this is a document that provides guidance to us on balancing recreational access and protecting our natural resources. And lots of the opportunities laid out in this document, intercept with the volunteer program. So I'm going to go through a few of the individual programs. So habitat restoration, that is our most popular program. It's kind of the easiest thing for people to volunteer with. We offer it quite often. And that's removing mostly French and Scotch broom, and we also do Douglas fir removal, things like that. So having families come and get hands-on work in the watershed is really beneficial to folks and to the environment. And it's easy to host really big broom pulls, so they're quite effective. And so, like I said, this is the main way for people to, the public to really be a part of the BIFI-FIP. And also it supports the Recreation Management Feasibility Study by offering frequent and easy ways for people to work with us on the mountain. So working outside brings out the best in people, and especially when you're like doing something physical and you can see your impact immediately. So trail stewardship is a program that we've been improving for over the past year. And the 7 of the 9 events that we had in the past fiscal year directly was working on the Azalea Hill Trail restoration project. So that gave a really big lift to that program. We also have litter abatement under this heading, which was a big program that we started in during COVID when we all had to social distance. And now we still have a few people that are really committed to their roots of removing trash, which is great. Okay, so community science. By having community scientists, we can really broaden our reach on monitoring wildlife and vegetation, and also interacting with the public and giving more public education. By involving lay people in this kind of science, you're really like, giving a lift to the community, and also having the scientists share their research is really valuable. And for example, with like frog and turtle docents, we train people on how to do the science, and they contribute genuine data. And we also give them the tools to communicate with the public. So 2 things that that have come out of community science as of late are bees and bears. So you guys all maybe read the fanfare a couple months ago about the finding of Trichusa gomifera, which is a San Francisco leafcutter bee, which hadn't been seen since 1977. So that's a rare bee. And that came from the Tamalpais Bee Lab. That 276 species, that inventory, this bee had not been seen. So the Tamalpais Bee Lab folks, we put together a protocol to look for this very specific bee, and we found it. I was there that day. I was not very helpful, but it was super cool. I think I collected like a beetle and a bumblebee. Anyways, it was really cool. And, even though we're like with this, particular search, it was looking for one very specific, organism. But when you're even studying one specific organism, you're really looking at all trophic levels and the everything that is the web of life that surrounds that one organism. So we're really learning so much more. And let's see, another thing is bears. So, there's been an increase in bear sightings in Marin. And with that, the public, they have questions, So last September, One Tam and other partners got together and did this super informative Living with Bears webinar. It's only an hour long. I highly suggest it. And so we talked about, where we've been seeing the bears, how we're, monitoring them for conservation, how we can live with bears, and, the culture of like having a positive community, culture around living with bears. So that was really positive. So that picture at the bottom is from our Marin Wildlife Watch program, that cute bear butt that's out on San Geronimo Ridge Road. Okay, so we also do quite a lot of outreach into the schools and the communities. The water district, I think, we are regarded as a really good resource on environmental topics. So going into schools like high schools, going into colleges, I've done communication workshops with AP Environmental Science. We've gone into universities and talked about what is recreation ecology. This bottom picture is Trout in the Classroom, which is a program run by CDFW and Trout Unlimited. And this past April, we had 51 classes come to Bontempi Lake over a week and a half to release baby trout. And other things like working with the San Rafael libraries. We do bilingual story times. So this is a photo at Pickleweed Library where we get to work with like our youngest stewards. Outreach also takes place on the watershed, so we can directly talk to visitors when they're here. If hopefully all of you have interacted with the TAM van, which is a super cool resource. When we want to, we've had topics ranging from the drought to, this is a photo when we set up by Little Carson Falls or Azalea Hill to talk about the frogs. And we can do this with the TAM van on the watershed, but we can also bring the watershed to community events, which is really powerful. Another outcome of, working on community engagement and outreach is we've done some self-guided forest walks now. There's some copies over here. We first did one at Lake Lagunitas, and that was a big effort with One Tam and also our Grizzly Corps program. And then this, more recently, we've done one post beneficial fire at Rock Spring, and those are in English and in Spanish. You can get them from the websites. They're also printed and available on site. So those are resources for the public. I mentioned Grizzly Corps is a big part of that beneficial fire and forest health outreach. We at the Natural Resources Department on the watershed work a lot with AmeriCorps programs. We have, the Grizzly Corps program. This is our third year working with them. They're created by the UC Berkeley College of Law, Energy, and the Environment, and their focus is forest health and fire and outreach. We also work with the Watershed Stewards Program, that's in the Fisheries Department, and their goal is to support salmonids and the health of those streams. And they also support community engagement and stewardship events across the watershed on other freshwater species. So with the Natural Resources Department, we use a lot of seasonals, early career folks. This photo at the left shows seasonals from different departments on the watershed. So we have vegetation aides, we have maintenance aides, we have volunteer program aide, and we have a ranger trainee here. And this is out at the Pine Mountain Tunnel Project, and they are being trained on biological monitoring. And then on the right, we have a couple of our ranger trainees, and they're out doing some trail maintenance with a CCC group. So, you know, working with young people, we try to keep in contact with our short-term interns and seasonals, and from them we learn that time spent with us is valuable, that we give them really great experience and networking and the confidence to go out and get their next job. So we couldn't do any of this without telling folks about it. So thank God we have a great public information department. And over just the past year, worked with them to update the volunteer program pages on the website. We have a new program pamphlet, which the last one was from 2020. So that was that was a really nice lift. Also put out our monthly newsletters and social media and just, you know, flyers around the watershed and in the community. So we have a really nice packaged message out to the community. Here are all those numbers that were on the individual slides. Don't need to go through that. And then, you know, why this work matters. You know, we're gonna look to the future, and, you know, the water district is great in offering all these opportunities for people to engage and people to gain the skills to be like productive citizens when you're thinking about all these environmental, you know, challenges we have in the world. So by having community engagement events, hands-on stewardship, community science, you know, we're really able to work with the community on that. That's it. Any questions?
Great, thank you very much. My guess is you could have taken 100 slides, with a lot
Yeah.
more going on, so it's always impressive to see the work that's going on out there, especially all the volunteer activities that are doing what they're doing and then producing what they're producing. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
More comments, Larry?
I thought it was interesting that you thought salamanders were cool.
They are.
I've always thought, no, I meant that differently. I've always thought they were cold. When I touch them, and it's interesting, I live in Paradise Cay, and
Mhm.
we had salamanders when we moved in. We don't see them now. So I don't know if we're like the eastern edge of that impact. And I don't know which salamanders it was, but there was a fair number of them.
Yeah, they do like cool, wet environments.
Yeah, and we have a storm drain that comes down from Ring Mountain
Mm.
that likely is where they're coming from or where they were coming from.
Mhm.
Maybe they prefer to stay up on Ring Mountain now. But yeah, they're very interesting individuals,
Yeah.
to say the least. A bit of their inability to get out of their own way, you know,
They don't move fast.
they don't move fast, and they don't seem to perceive threat.
No, which also just kind of makes them adorable.
They're kind of like, yeah, like they're on Xanax or something, you know, they're just always cool.
Most of them are poisonous.
Yeah, don't lick them.
And no, I don't like. They definitely is not an incentive to do that. Even the dogs wouldn't lick them.
Anything besides the salamander?
So,
Okay, thank you. Good.
Suzanne, I'm super proud of the work
Okay.
you're doing and the work we're doing here. And I would hope that some of our local environmentalists and native plant specialists would maybe be more supportive of this tremendous work and appreciative of what we're doing as an organization as a whole. I think there's so much we can do and are doing and working together, and recognition of that would be important. And Adrian, I think it would be wonderful if we can help communicate this tremendous effort to our broader community, and that we can gain more appreciation. The only thing that I think is a little bit missing from this is some trend data. So it looks like you're doing an astonishing amount of work, and I know we've looked at this over time. It looks like there's been a pickup in volunteer effort, a pickup in events, and it'd be good to understand how that has shifted over the past years or even decades. I don't know how much you have of events and volunteers. And I'd love to know how we can be more supportive, what either staff or resource needs, or other ways that we can help you do this really, really important work that's important for our organization and our community as a whole.
Well, thank you. And yeah, I don't think I highlighted enough the importance of partnerships. Of course, One TAM comes to mind, being 10 years together with those agencies, but the libraries and the schools and, different community groups, and you cannot do this on your own. So it's really cool to see. And over time, it's been 15 years since I was hired as the first, community organizer here. Yeah, we've had shifts and trends, and it's hard to now go back and show apples to apples because things have changed. But we've always had a great community here, like in the wider Bay Area. I get a lot of folks, not just from Marin, but over both bridges, because Mount Tam is such an iconic place for everybody in the Bay Area that people don't mind coming all the way over here to work on the watershed.
I mean, I think I can speak for the board, and maybe as a rebuttal to anyone who thinks that we're here to trash the watershed. We are fully supportive of what you're doing. We care a lot about taking care of this watershed, and I hope people recognize that. And we are very supportive of what you're doing. So really do think about how we can help out.
Thanks.
I have one more.
Please.
Why do you think the biodiversity is so significant here? Why is it so high?
Because we're a mountain. So with having a mountain, we have so many different.
Yosemite's a mountain too.
That is true. I don't know. Maybe we have more just microclimates, and there's just the aspects and the slopes and the elevations, and there's just so many different nooks and crannies, and maybe that's a little more homogeneous. Than I haven't been to Yosemite in a long time. I haven't been to all the trails on Mount Tam either. So.
I think maybe too, it has to do with the fact that we're in the rain shadow of
Yeah.
the mountain, and also the fact that it's a coastal forest. I have a friend that teaches ecology at in Puerto Rico, and he was out and we were in Muir Woods, and he was commenting that it's so unusual to have a forest of that density
Mm-hmm.
that close to the ocean. It's just an unusual thing, and we have it everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Pieces of it.
Right.
We have that fog shadow that comes in and provides the rain or the water to those plants. That is pretty unique.
Yeah.
This whole thing, but it's still interesting that it's so biodiverse.
Yeah, and we're not in the tropics. Like, this is
No,
No.
that's a tropics is almost a desert.
a whole nother thing.
Yeah, I mean, boy, so much. This is so important for so many reasons. This is a big part of what you're doing is really highlighting the aspect of the district that often people will overlook as they turn on their tap and water comes out and they're like, good to go. That water comes from our watershed, 80%, 75% of it. And the health of the watershed is the health of our water. We get that, but between you and Adrian communicating out to people and then sharing in the experiences, that is part of what gets the message further out, and for people to really touch the watershed. So hugely supportive of your work, and it's just so incredibly important. To Jed's point, it'd be great to just see some metrics over time. I know that things change, budgets, public, funding, for schools goes up and down, and that affects their ability to visit and so forth. But I want to focus on two different groups. One is our schools. What you know, can you talk to the, you know, I love that we go out to schools. I love that. I mean, for schools that can't afford or just for greater accessibility, that we go to the schools and we bring the watershed to their classrooms. But I'm a huge fan of also what can we do to get more classrooms out into our watershed, because there's no way to replace actually touching ground in our land. What where where have we been at with schools coming out, and what do you think the biggest barrier is for schools being able to come out to the watershed?
Sure. Now there is a field trip to the watershed that is run by the Water Conservation Department, and I actually shadowed it just a couple months ago to check out what was happening. So they've really picked up on that, getting classrooms onto the watershed. Since COVID stopped, let's not stopped, you know what I'm saying? The schools getting permission to go back out in groups. So water conservation has picked up on that, whereas our program before that, we did the majority of the field trips, and they were restoration field trips. They're In order to run a really good field trip, you have to have the right kind of staff that can support the educational, component and the safety component, and manage the students and the parents all at the same time. So staff intensive, and 10 years ago I had more support from different places, and now it's just a different thing. So the water conservation is doing that. I think the schools, over the years, we realized like schools weren't coming. One barrier was transportation. And so we do actually offer money for buses at first it was for only Title I schools. And then we realized people weren't even using it. So we said any schools. And even then it's still a bit of a barrier because there's no public school bus depot in Marin. So even just getting buses is really difficult. So transportation, not just for school children, but just to the watershed in general, can be a barrier.
Wow, well, that's sad to know that the problem is being able to get the kids to the far
Sometimes,
watershed.
and then individual teachers I've, talked with, you gotta like convince the principal that it's worthwhile and all that kind of stuff. So the younger students, it's usually that's a thing that the school is supportive of. And then the high schools is a little bit more difficult because if they spend a day on the watershed, then they're missing AP history and things like that. So that's where now I'm actually just a bit more willing to like go to the school versus before I was like, no, you have to come to the mountain. Like that's our biggest asset, which it is, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes that you can't take high school kids out for half a day. So instead, we go to the school.
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, my kids are passing through elementary school, and they've done field trips to the Mission and to to San Francisco and other places, but they never did a field trip to the watershed. And I just think that, that's a missed opportunity. This is their backyard.
Sure. I
And,
mean, a goal,
and
I would love someday to like be a field station for, like College of Marin, like folks that are in college for ecological sciences and things like that who never get outside that's where I'm like, what? So working with certain teachers at College of Marin and other, UCSF and things like that, and getting those students outside, like Dominican is
I'm going to come
really
back to
great.
that because that was my second thing. But I want to see, I want to encourage us to figure out how we can work with our local schools to make it more accessible. I mean, I don't know what that is. I know that it's hard for teachers. They're already overworked and don't have enough resources, and it's hard to get, I see the forms, volunteering, asking parents to get on the buses and stuff too, taking their day off to be able to come do these things. It's just, these are our future customers. These are the people who will vote for, for funds that provide money to watershed and restoration and conservation, other things. I just think we should be investing early and often with our younger people in our community. It's part of the service. And I wonder whether do we have I often hoped at some point that we have a visitor center up near Sky Oaks or someplace nearby where schools, it makes it really easy for schools to come, and because as you've pointed out and getting to my second question, which is that we have a world-class biosphere location that is incredibly biologically rich. And, if you compare to Yosemite, and I would imagine the number of researchers, let alone school groups that go to Yosemite, vastly eclipse what we do or what happens for us. And so, going to the question of universities, I wonder to what extent, what can we do to get, I mean, research is free, Carl would probably love to have, need some time to manage it, but like you would love to have like 10 research groups that are like, we want to research bees, we want to research inverts, we want to research fish. There's so many important ecological questions that we can answer here in close proximity to all these universities. That's really makes us an asset, because people who are in school, they want to do research topics. They don't want to have to fly to Alaska to ask the question. If they can go and do a project that's nearby, just a huge opportunity. So any thoughts about like how to attract more of those research partnerships? Or Carl?
Sure, go for it.
It may not be apparent to maybe the board, but we do permit quite a bit of research each year. I bet that we're approached, excuse me, by half a dozen or more individuals across the country asking questions and seeking permission to use the watershed to conduct their research. We run it through the appropriate, experts on the watershed. Oftentimes it's our veg ecologist, making sure that the work that they're doing is not going to have a negative impact on the species that they're looking at. But a lot of that research is ongoing and takes years to get the results. And we haven't presented that as a complete packet to the board, but
And I don't mean to say that we're not.
Yeah.
My question is like, is there something that we could do to attract more of that? Because I would imagine more is better in this case because there's so much to learn here.
Almost like in Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. No, and I
And
mean,
on
like,
another note for the research, we are now completing a 10-year process that started actually it informed our BIFIP back in the day. So the forestry work, the forest health work that we did initially on mostly Bolinas Ridge, Ridgecrest Boulevard, they're going back now for 10-year data collection. I just signed their permit earlier this week, so it might be a little while before we see the results, but we'll now have, that's a pretty good one to have. It's a 10-year study on the effects of the initial fuel treatment.
Yeah, that's the UC Davis.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
UC Davis, Cal Poly.
Yeah, for several summers with that particular project, we worked with the UC Davis team, and then we brought the summer link interns and had them work together. So that was pretty cool. So again, just making building that win-win-win, and that the researchers were from a university, and then we brought these high school folks together. They were more than willing to spend a couple days teaching folks on how to do monitoring and what's the big picture, and also hiking up pokey forests, and this is what you do if you're a research scientist. So
Yeah.
That's pretty
Well,
cool.
I'll because I don't want to keep us too long. I just would recommend. I mean, first of all, I love research, so I would encourage at our watershed committee meetings to quarterly or something. Well, we meet quarterly. Present on some of the research findings because A, it's cool. B, it's great. Stuff to highlight for for media and outreach and so forth. And then the other thing I would encourage, at some point, giving some thought, like what are the barriers to both school groups and researchers coming more to the watershed? What are those things, and are there things that we can do, to help make that more possible and stretch and grow? I know that might take more capacity and other things, so it just can't magically happen because we want it. But understanding what the limitations are, what the barriers are, gives us an opportunity to think about what we can do and maybe make it more possible.
Yeah, I think I'll second that, Suzanne. I remember when I bumped up into you up in the at the station, and you shared with me a recent report on the yellow-legged foothill frog, and that research was fascinating to me, and it was in deep. I think you sent it to the board, but I'm not sure. But yeah, we'll take everything you get. It's really fun stuff.
Yeah, and that's
Really
community,
important.
the power of community science. We've really increased our, especially like one TAM, that's like a big lift in the community science. Because you're building these programs that you can then take in classes, but you can also take in individuals. And we're becoming smarter also with our community science, and not just building our own programs, but feeding into larger programs that have, data sets that we've got our local knowledge, but then you have wider California or national information. So like the California Bumblebee Atlas I mentioned, there's a nesting ground bee study. The Marin Wildlife Watch is actually the way that we extrapolate that data. That's an international protocol called the Wildlife Picture Index. So it's not just like data that we're keeping to ourselves. It's community science is all about sharing that data and making it accessible. And yeah.
Suzanne, are you guys, is the district working with iNaturalist at all?
Yeah, we use iNaturalist a lot. Like with the bio blitzes, we send that information out ahead of time to get people to get their account. And then we do a lot of just teaching on how do you take a good photo, so you're not just uploading fuzzy photos that nobody can identify. And whether it's our volunteers or our staff or just the general public, things that go into iNaturalist that then are verified, then go into the bigger, again, that bigger database, that CNDDD database for vegetation. And so then that informs whether we're looking for rare species or for invasive species. That gets mined from just those public observations.
Yeah, it'd be interesting because the gentleman who found it is a San Rafael resident.
He is,
Right,
yeah, I
so
know him.
It'd be interesting to see if he could help us carve out anything special if we ever needed to scrape out data sets. If you guys aren't already doing that
He
already.
did in 2012. They did in 2012, 2012, 13, 14. We did this huge vegetation bio blitz on the mountain. It was to celebrate our 100-year anniversary. And we were able to get him to put in a few extra fields. That was for the collection of the plants that we collected, that then were pressed and now are housed at California Academy of Sciences Herbarium.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome.
I have a few more.
Please.
It's interesting, your questions, because those have been in the board since I've been on the board, the same issue about improving school participation. And I thank you, Jared, and your group for seeing the way to deal with the busing, because I was about to ask that question until you said that we're helping, because there was a liability concern that we backed out, as I recall, when this was proposed the first time. There was an issue with, other activities for these kids that was too much responsibility to deal with busing. Like that was the legal response that I remember from that time.
Yeah, we just reimburse. We let the
No, I
teachers have
understand
to
that.
deal with it.
That's
And then we
probably how they
reimburse.
dealt with the liability. is-
Yeah.
Yeah, is they don't actually provide, because I was
Yeah.
proposing providing the buses, arranging for the buses
Gotcha.
to make it happen, because especially for the kids over in lesser income areas of Marin that need more help. And I'm glad to hear we're doing that. The other thing is, it seems to me that we should consider a program like a junior ecologist or something like that, or talk to COM about having a course that you guys, if I understand you're busy, but you may be incented to think about that, to have a course, credit course here on the Watershed, for the COM folks. The same way with the high school seniors have those obligations about public service. That may lead to some kind of a certificate program that we could offer that would draw them in to us. They could kind of kill two birds with one stone.
Yeah, you definitely
So-
want to do that as a partnership.
Yes, of course, of course. So that's something to think about. I think there's some potential there. And, you know, if there's anything the board can do, let us know.
Cool.
All set, Larry. Great. Just to wrap things up on a personal thank you, because our second daughter is about to go through the trout program this year, and the first one's still talking about it. So it was a really big impact for that. And also too, a thank you for your leadership in the broom pulls. You get there and it's like almost like drill camp right off the bat. Everyone gets their thing and ready to go. But watching all the volunteers follow and take your lead, it's pretty neat, especially watching all the work being done. So thank you with that. In terms of a bigger picture, I know this is probably a much bigger topic than today, but touching on what Monty and Larry are saying, I think when we start looking at a master plan for watershed infrastructure and what we can do, what does the future look like? It's going to be really important to hear from you and the staff of the watershed. Does the visitors welcome centers or an educational opportunity area with like a pavilion? You know, is there something like a state park welcome center that we have? And included in that, some sort of space where we can have researchers that come and they're not trying to work out of a vehicle or in some corner of an office somewhere. They actually have a little bit of a space they can do that. Would be really interesting to see how we can try to support that, make that happen. With that, Terry, any public comment?
Let me add a little bit to that.
One more.
We took a shot at that previously. We were going to convert the log cabin into the center. The problem was the rehabilitation costs of the log cabin. It's got some kind of beetle or something that's gotten, it's actually made out of logs. There's a bark beetle or something that's infested. So the cost of getting it back to usable shape was more than it was feasible.
Yeah.
So, you know, but that is the location, likely, the best place for it, if we could just figure out a way to do it around that building.
And I think as we start looking at some of these efforts, you know, philanthropic contributions are going to be a key component of this, especially as we look to do something that's going to be a pretty marquee fixture on the watershed, you know, and everyone will get to see. But
Yeah, well, the partnership with One TAM is likely the vehicle to get that.
Agreed.
Whether I think they look at us more as a resource than as a sink for money. So, you know, I don't know that they would do that, but they might. They surely have the mechanism to do it. The question is priorities.
Mr. Larry Minikis.
Yeah, I just want to thank Suzanne and just for all the work you've been doing all these years. I forget how long you've been doing this, but I'm
15 years.
15, and I've been a long-term volunteer. And speaking from that perspective, I can say that Suzanne is your chief cheerleader out there. She's so well organized and super enthusiastic. And I think that translates into how the volunteers feel about the work that they're doing out there. And really just want to say thank you to her and Carl, of course. Both of them are just terrific to work with. Thank you so much.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
great. Terry, upcoming meetings.
Yes, the next Watershed Committee meeting is December 19th.
Great. Thank you. With that, we'll go ahead and adjourn today's meeting.